Suspect in that massive leak of Pentagon secrets in federal court in Boston today, less than 24 hours after his arrest. 21-year-old Jack Teixeira had top secret clearance as an IT specialist with the Massachusetts Air National Guard.
Teixeira comes from a family with strong military ties. His mother volunteered with a veterans group.
As the world watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The scope of the leak is still coming into focus, but the FBI already accuses Jack Teixeira of betraying the country.
Hiding nearby,
Father retired after a 34-year career with the same unit Teixeira served, the 102nd Intelligence Wing at Joint Base Cape Cod. His senior year quote in his high school yearbook, "Actions speak louder than words." Online, Teixeira allegedly leading a group of about 24, mostly young men and teen boys, on the discussion forum Discord. The group tell the Washington Post Teixeira was known as OG. He boasted of access to classified material, they said, and posted the secrets for them to see. And spread those posts far beyond the small chat group as they made their way around the world. Teixeira held a top-secret security clearance. Federal prosecutors said he improperly and unlawfully retained and transmitted national defense information to people not authorized to receive it.
There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
Ammunition used by cyber war.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time
Is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
Turned violent across America. The arrest of a former Minneapolis police officer for the murder of George Floyd, failing to stop another night of rage in that
but the
city.
use of this force as an integral part of combat has now taken on new forms.
I have information from various sources that judges, law enforcement, prosecutors, attorneys, doctors, and many prominent individuals, including actors in professional football, baseball players, are involved in this type of thing.
Hammered it into us. You cannot tell anybody about what you saw or what you went through. This is Cold War. To decrease the enemy's ability to perform without killing them.
Participants receive the incapacitating agent by inhalation. A low dose of agent is fed into the mixing bowl,
causing serious damage to the national security of the United States.
One of the best ways of taking over the world is to control people's minds.
These are the Psy-War soldiers.
Hey, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major auto podcatchers and Odyssey as well. That was a dope-ass edit that was made by one of my guests tonight. She'll tell you about it here in a second. I do want to let you guys know how this works. It's patreon.com/No Way Jose 2020 if you want to have access to content earlier. These go up as live streams for patrons. This will go up probably in a few days from when it originally is being aired. But yeah, if you want to have access to it, like I said, I gave you the site. But lowest level is $2, highest level is 20. 20 is my sponsor. Sponsors Mikkel Thorpe of the Expat Money Show. Jeremy Rhymes, who has a Etsy store, etsy.com/shop at Raising Liberty or /Raising Liberty. I'm having brain farts a whole bunch today. And then also have Jeremy, or I just said him, Toad, my co-host on Tower Gang. Yeah, you can find him on Tower Gang Show. You can also follow him on Twitter. I am all tongue-tied today. At Tower Gang Toad, if you want to follow him there. That's my offensive comedy show, Tower Gang. So, if you don't like that, don't watch it. Just there's your fair warning. Then I also have Zach Overacker at ZOVERACK, and then also Mike Dagalish. Also, make sure you go to TopLobsta.com. You can get the Yiki shirt that I got here. I want to try to keep this short. Let's go ahead and get into our guests. Christina and Ken, what's up?
Hey.
Hey, tell us a little bit of that video. How hard was it to do? I'm a tech retard. That looks like a lot of fucking work. I'm like, holy shit, this audio is all perfect. Everything.
No, I swear it wasn't a lot of work, but basically what I wanted to do was take the pre-existing 8th psyops video where they basically tell you who and what they are and like what they do. The video itself is sort of like a psyop also. So I kind of wanted to remix that and just include different things about the Jack Teixeira story, but also just other pieces of things that I thought went in there well. So I just kind of had like an artistic vision when I woke up, and I just sat there and edited it for like hours.
Awesome. Christine, you want to remind the audience who you are? I know you've been on the show before, but who you are, kind of the rough sort of work you do. I know you're kind of like me and you cover a lot of different stuff, but I guess kind of what you're more known for. And yeah, that's just go.
Yes, I'm an independent journalist. I have a YouTube channel, Radix. I'm on Twitter also and a bunch of other places, and I cover whatever I find interesting, I guess. Probably most well known right now for the documentary I'm working on the Whitmer Fednapping case.
Hell yeah. And then we got Ken on the bottom. I fucking love Ken. He's always putting out crazy ass work that like good shit. It's weird. So whenever I first wanted to do this episode, I mean, if anyone looked at the title, which I'm sure you did whenever you ever opened this, it's why Oklahoma City bombing still matters. I mean, anyone's been following my show knows I've been kind of on a tear on that lately. And that's kind of been the little bit of the feedback I've gotten is that like why it matters. And I think we're kind of make the case here. And I think Ken is a perfect example of why it matters when you look at his body of work. And I'm pretty sure, I think you were kind of semi-red pilled by the whole Oklahoma City bombing story. So there you go. But Ken, I know you've been on my show multiple times, but go ahead and let the audience know who you are again and kind of let them know about your body work roughly. And then maybe it'll click for the audience.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on again. I'm a reporter for Headline USA. You could also find a lot of my work for the Libertarian Institute, and I primarily cover FBI corruption, malfeasance, and just overall growing U.S. police state.
All right, awesome. But yeah, Christina here, basically the Michigan stuff. Also, we kind of all swim in the same water somewhat with the stuff we like to cover. And then Ken kind of covers Michigan, OKC, and a bunch of other shit as well. He's kind of the mix between us two. Like I said, like I did bring up because it was probably between going like probably the biggest thing. I got a big bump from going part of the Palm recently. Probably the biggest feedback I noticed, and I've heard this elsewhere too, is like, well, why does this matter? Why does this matter? There's some shit from '95, and for one, I can give you write a whole paper on why it matters. But we're kind of I think I want to breeze over stuff. I guess first off, we can kind of start with I think the best reason is because it's like. It's still within that time range that it fucking matters, and there are people whose ass is on the line. So if you can actually make it ping, make it pop, you can get people. And also we're at a point where there's so much documents, this, that it's like built such a massive case. Yeah, I mean, Ken, you're probably the work that immediately comes to mind is Garland, and I'm sure maybe some other pieces come to mind. But if you want to take a moment and speak on the people that are still in power that are related to the Oklahoma City bombing, in really any form, it's actually quite crazy when you know the people that are involved. It's a lot of big names that are high up that that even just like normies would be like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that's true. And you've asked me to explain Garland and the significance of the Attorney General before, and I think I might not have done it justice. So I tried to memorize this quote from your sitting Attorney General, who said, quote, "It doesn't matter if there were 2 people in that Ryder truck or 100 people. The only person on trial is Timothy McVeigh." That's our sitting Attorney General who knows that there was others involved in the Oklahoma City bombing, but actively covered it up. I think everybody should have that quote memorized. It should be on, T-shirts, posters, everything, because, like I said, the top law enforcement official of this country is still covering up the deadliest domestic terrorism act in American history.
Yeah, I vaguely remember too. There was later that he made some comments. This was after all that hullabaloo that he knew there was a John Doe too. Like he said it in your kind of flippant comments. I believe that was actually in your article. So it's not something that he just I don't know. You can't give him too much benefit of the doubt because it's like he knows. He's the top guy. Like he theoretically could do something about it. I forget his exact role at the time. Do you remember what his role was in the case? Was he the lead prosecutor or what was the specific role he was taking?
Yeah, he worked for the DOJ out of Washington, D.C., and the DOJ wanted somebody from, they call it Main Justice. All the FBI agents and lawyers who work in D.C., they're the Main Justice. So he was kind of the D.C.'s representative. They sent him out to Oklahoma as a liaison between the big powers that be and the local people in Oklahoma. That was kind of his official role. You could call him an errand boy. He didn't have a whole lot of power. He did, however, prosecute McVeigh's preliminary hearing, which Jesse Trenadu has called it. At the time, it was the most important preliminary hearing in the history of the country. That's where they confirmed that, yes, we're moving forward with these charges against Timothy McVeigh. And that's where that quote I had referenced, where he said, it doesn't matter if there were 2 people in the truck or 100 people, the only person's on trial is McVeigh, because he was trying to say, you know, we're going to concentrate on the one guy and make sure we convict him. It doesn't matter if there were others involved, because that would affect the integrity of what I'm trying to do, my case.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess to be fair, maybe there's some case to be had, but when you add into it the role that he fills and the role that he filled then, and then on top of it, one of the big things Bill Clinton and many other individuals within the upper echelon of those people, the ones in charge, whatever you want to call them at that time, were made tons of statements about how no stone left unturned, stuff like that. So, yeah, it is. There's a lot of people. I mean, there's Eric Holder, which I mean, I don't think we have anything necessarily as damning against him, but he was integral to the cover-up stuff with Trenadu. What was it? Robert Mueller as well. I think. I mean, I'm not saying these people we know specific things they did theoretically wrong, but it's like, let's be real, they were in key positions within these things going on. So like, they probably did some fucked up shit.
Yeah. And it was when Merrick Garland, he was put up for nomination by Obama to be on the Supreme Court in 2016. And it wasn't successful because Republicans knew that Obama was a lame duck. So they kind of just stalled until Trump took office. But it was during his confirmation hearings that Garland insisted that we got everybody involved in Oklahoma City. They were all brought to justice. And there was a bunch of puff pieces about how he masterfully handled the investigation and the prosecution. But all you have to do is read the transcripts from the preliminary hearing, and you know he was lying.
Yeah. I'd be interested with this I bet you I'd be willing to put money that there are probably ties between some of the people there and then Michigan. Because I think I know there's ties from Christina can talk to this, from the Michigan case to January 6th. I mean, a little bit higher up. It's not a perfect straight line, but like kind of. Actually, it is more of a straight line that I'm recalling. You can probably enlighten the audience this, Christina, but I know the Wolverine Watchmen at one point during one of their demonstrations got let into the Capitol, I believe. They were kind of ushered in by the police.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. This was in April of 2020. They had an anti-lockdown protest, and Adam Fox attended this protest, by the way, completely separate from the Wolverine Watchmen. He hadn't met those guys yet. He just happened to be there, ironically, which may be how he got on the radar. But Dan Chappell was there with some members of the Wolverine Watchmen. They were armed, wearing their plate carriers and stuff like that. And Dan, he's wearing a wire. He's talking to his handling agents at the FBI in real time. And he says, oh, I think these guys are getting ready to do something. So the clowns at the FBI call the Lansing Capitol Police and tell them, we want you guys to stand down, open the doors, and let everybody in. And they're like, okay. So they open the doors, they let everybody in. And these guys go through COVID screening. But needless to say, they're photographed inside the Capitol, and the media is kind of splashing these images across, the front pages. And they're saying that these guys stormed the building and they occupied it and looked big, scary, and menacing. So they got their photo up, and the Wolverine Watchmen got some national attention from that, which was good for the FBI because the FBI needed to try to find people that they could recruit into the Wolverine Watchmen to set up as patsies. Yeah. So yeah, they totally did that. That's like literally a dry run for January 6th. That was their idea. They mischaracterized what happened. The pictures kind of look scary, but yeah, that's their dry run. And then the same kind of thing happens on January 6th. You have the same guy who was head of the Detroit field office, who Stephen D'Antuono, who's heading up the Washington, D.C. field office on January 6th, where the same thing happens.
Yeah, no, and the kind of point I'm getting at is, like, I was trying to tie it. I was trying to think of like names, if I could think of names and other individuals. It's a tangled web of connections, but I was like reaching in my head, grasping. I was like, there's got to be one FBI agent connected to another, but then I realized I'm coming up blank. But the point I'm getting at is roughly, you have these people in power from things from like the mid 90s or whatever, and the nature of the deep state is that these people stay there for forever, and even when they do leave, they usually pass on their information through their proteges, their protocols, their methods, all that stuff. And so once you start seeing these things, it's become so blatant. I mean, I know it feels so schizo when you explain it, but you're like, I can see the patterns. And like, once you can see the patterns, you're like, oh, this is easy. Like, it's like, once you have your like Rosetta Stone, you can just kind of, and like, yeah, I mean, the key is not to like go too deep into the schizo and immediately be like, I know it. Like, you have to be like, oh, I think this is it. But like, I don't know. I'm not gonna rave like a madman about it until I get some sort of like fucking something to back it up. But like, you legit get to a point where you're just like, oh, that. Oh yeah, that's like this. That's like, I bet you it's that. And it really does completely, key you into whatever the hell's going on. Like, but for example, the Teixeira stuff, it looks like, Christina, like you did a kind of a deep dive on this. I did no deep dive at all. It looks like we came to basically the same conclusion. I literally just looked at a few little Twitter headlines and stuff and just puzzled it together. And you're like, yeah, looks like we're about right. But I guess that's a kind of a good semi-transition to Teixeira. And like, I kind of want to hear what have you got from this deep dive? Because it's kind of, it is, I don't really know how to explain it other than this is fucking wild.
It's super weird. It's a bizarre story. So like the first reports, I guess, were suggesting that this information that somehow made its way onto the internet from Discord or wherever was a Russian operation. And then that changed. And then the story was an Orthodox Zoomer racist gamer had
awesome.
had some server where he was just in some special boy fight, and then to like win some argument he just starts posting this stuff, and that isn't what happened either. But the way that the whole thing is handled was very questionable, and I think very obvious. You've got Bellingcat, they're supposedly the ones that identify him, and I still have questions about how they were able to do that based on like a granite countertop in a picture, mostly of a document. So they just saw little things in like the corner of the picture and were to believe that somehow, through magic, they were able to like identify this kid right away. And then everybody in his Discord server, and they go and interview them. And just the way that it was presented was very strange to me. So I think that there's definitely a lot more going on here than they're telling us. And then I question the documents themselves and what actually was the big national security thing here, and how this is kind of going to be used, of course, to push for more. Oh, we need to go after insider threats. Oh, look at these gamers, these Orthodox people. I think that, it's obviously, it's an op, as we say.
Yeah.
Whether by design or they're, using it to make it into an op, I can't say, but it's definitely an op.
Yeah, my read on the situation, real quick, and tell me if I'm wrong. I think I did watch one of your videos later, and may have watched something else, and it was like, okay, it seems to be I'm kind of on the right track. My read is, and this first part of my list is like something I kind of came I guess I wouldn't say the conclusion, but to the vibe of later. I think he would likely probably was in these group chats. I think there was whether, some sort of operative of some sort, hey, buddy, hey, friend, and was kind of feeding him info of some sort, because it does seem weird that he had some of this stuff. So somehow he's getting this other stuff. Yeah. I bet you someone else in a group was feeding him information, and they probably alerted the journalists who then, get to play the game of being, undercover informant or whatever, and then they leak it. It becomes a circular thing where they then, it is kind of like how much of this is like contrived to like they kind of play like this is what happened, but essentially they knew they bring him in, and then it becomes this weird bastardized mixture of media and state here, and yeah, then from there, then the two have kind of merged at the hip, the media and the state here. And essentially now they're doing this thing where they're doing this controlled release of the documents that weirdly haven't been that widely proliferated, as opposed to supposedly being such a damning crazy shit.
They're sharing the scoops, by the way. They're deciding who gets what. They're dividing it amongst themselves.
I can't think of a smarter not smarter, but like a more fed up, I guess.
Well, and then watching the media like dox this guy before the feds, and then cheer for him to be arrested and say, oh, he's not a whistleblower, because he's against their narrative. If what he was revealing they liked, then they would say, oh, he's wonderful, he's a hero, like Eric Charmella, like Vindman, then he's a hero and we have to protect him and he's defending our sacred democracy.
Yeah, and it's funny because everyone tries to bring up what's his face, fucking the dude over in Russia, Snowden. Everyone tries to bring up him and like, look at all the painstaking efforts he went to make sure he did everything right. But it's like, yeah, he's like, if you don't, I know there's people who think he's some sort of op as well, but let's say he's not an op. It's like, okay, but he still got fucked. So like, you're not making the point you think you're making, and also it's like you're fucked either way. Like I really think, the frequent example I use is the Dateline NBC fucking the surveillance videos of Oklahoma City bombing. It's like, yeah, some Fed tried to give it to them and they fucking outed them. So it's like it doesn't really matter like if you go to the respectable institutions. Like I guess maybe you might luck up, but it's like you're probably fucked no matter what. If anything, you're better off. I guess if you're a Teixeira character, you're fucked no matter what because you're in the military. But like say you aren't some in the military, your best move, get that information out as to anyone you can, any way you can, as widely, cast as wide and as you can, and just tell fucking everyone. Damn, be whatever sensitive info there is, like, because you really, and don't go to anyone official because you'll get fucked. Like it's weird. They're sending this like complete inverse of what the truth is. It's nuts, Yeah,
and I'll just throw it in there that Bellingcat, the publication that helped track down this whistleblower, is the same publication that was pushing the propaganda that Assad gassed his own people in Syria and things like that. So Bellingcat, it receives money from government organizations. It's practically an organ of the state.
They're basically, it looked like a Fed cutout to me.
Basically. It's a cutout. Yeah, that's how I view it. It's like a pro-NATO CIA cutout. They get money from the National Endowment for Democracy. So
I bet you it's more of like a Chomsky thing, which I'm sure both of you guys has heard the Chomsky line where he's like, where he was talking to the reporter, and it was the whole idea. He's like, are you basically saying I'm lying or whatever, basically grifting to be here? He's like, no, I'm basically saying that you wouldn't be here if you didn't have these opinions. And I think that's the Bellingcat, probably kind of what's going on Bellingcat effect. So I think there are people who are like, oh, I'm doing great work. And you're like, no, you're just, I don't know, that blue pilled, and it's just like that's why you got hired here, because you're just that much of a dolt. Like they're just like, this idiot will write whatever we want and do what we say, and he's all about it. He's like, I'm fucking saving the world.
Yeah, and they gave this the New York Magazine, I think it might have been, gave a big profile, or maybe it was the New York Times, did this big profile on the Bellingcat clown who outed this guy, like, oh, we brought him in to work with us. And blah, blah, blah. He's such a, look at all the great work he's done, which is funny.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I not really much. It really is. There's not too much to say about the Teixeira stuff because it is just so fuzzy at the moment. But at the very least, it's like this glows like the sun. And that I think is the usefulness of understanding things like OKC. The Oklahoma City bombing, like in the wider story, it really is. It is like I think for so far as like conspiracy stuff or understanding the nature of the deep state, I think it's probably one of the best Rosetta Stones there is out there, because it's go ahead.
I will say for Teixeira, I feel very bad for him because I think that, people have already had their minds made up about him now, haven't they? Because this is what the media does. They can just slander people. I hadn't seen any evidence to suggest, like, show me the evidence that this kid posted this in the Discord server, first of all. Like, prove that, and then we'll take it from there. But I haven't even seen that. But they all rush to judgment on him and to talk about what kind of person he is, which I don't think anybody can do that doesn't know him.
Yeah. Ken, you're going to say something?
I don't think he's going to get any kind of like fair coverage or fair trial, and it's very sad.
I was just wondering if Jose had any insight into how this kid had access to this top secret material when he was like in the Air Guard in Maine or something like that.
Air National Guard.
I mean, we can get in the weeds here, because when it comes to Guard and Reserve units, they have what's like, I guess you could almost call them active. Like in the Guard, you have AGRs. They call them active Guard. No, that's something else. But essentially, they have people who essentially are basically active duty, but they're technically Guard. It's this weird in-between thing that they do between Guard and Reserve. So it is like, I know a lot of people go, Guard. And don't get me wrong, I go, Guard. But there's traditional Guard, and then there's Guard Reserves, and then there's like your full-time Guard and full-time Reserves. And basically, they hold it down like a 5 days a week type job, and they're hired full time, and they're doing that. They're, if anything, usually a lot of times, I guess probably maybe differs from Guard Reserves. A lot of times they're more competent than the actual active duty guys. It's just kind of the culture that goes into them, because they, being Guard and Reserve, they're a little bit different than active. They don't have to worry about, like, their deployments are different. They don't have to worry about like being sent to other bases, because that is their base. Like, they're not going anywhere else unless they request it. So it's more of like a tight unit. But yeah, I don't know. So far as like him having access to it, like, I don't know. What was it? I think
his dad worked there too for years. Yeah,
Okay.
for the 102nd Intelligence branch.
I mean, maybe he had a full-time job, there, and was like a full-time guard. I don't remember what rank they said. He said it was either an A1C or a senior airman. Did either of you remember? And it was a low rank, but that does make a huge difference, because like A1C, you're getting probably, I mean, I wasn't ever Intel, so I wouldn't fucking know. I was a knuckle dragger. I was a mechanic, but like, so far, I really, just the general roles and responsibilities given to each rank, I feel like in A1C, that's nonsense. Like, I mean, I guess, maybe somehow he could have got it one way or the other. Now we're getting into like how their systems work, which I've never really used, like top secret systems. But, if he was a senior airman, it's a little bit more believable, because that is when you do get into like more of a, I don't know, esteemed, I guess you can say. And there are like, I mean, it's still kind of like a junior individual, but I don't know. It really is like too in the weeds to know. I mean, it wouldn't, knowing how like being active duty for 11 years and like just kind of how government things work. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if somehow he accidentally got it, or maybe he had access to other things he wasn't supposed to, or maybe they were just being sloppy in their procedures. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because you always see on shit like, oh, military grade tough, and you're like, that doesn't mean a goddamn thing. I mean, obviously it's different military tough than that. They're talking about like the durability of an item, but the idea that the military is this like sophisticated entity that's like better than the private world, not really.
I don't think so.
So I don't know. I mean, it does seem fishy to me. I mean, but I've never really worked.
It seems weird.
Insanely sloppy that I don't even like. How did they have a printer? How did he print off these documents
from his skiff?
It's crazy.
Well, how is he transcribing them for months? He supposedly, like, this is what we're supposed to believe, was transcribing them. He was sitting in a skiff all day, hand typing them. I don't know on what device or how he was doing that, because I don't think they were supposed to have that in a skiff. And then because he was bitching about how he had to transcribe them into the Discord server, and his friends were mostly ignoring them, because they just wanted to play video games.
So this guy's the one guy in the group chat dropping walls of text.
Top unicorn. You know,
I can only imagine if I had my group chat. I'd be like, I'd probably want to leave. I'd be like, some weird Fed shit's going on right now.
Yes, exactly. It's so weird. And then he supposedly got so mad after doing that and getting ignored or not getting enough attention. People got bored with it. And I think he got tired of it. I guess he just started taking printouts home and then somehow taping them together and like photographing them from home. This is how supposedly they ID'd him. But I just kind of wonder, like, what is going on here? This is allowed to happen. If this did happen, who's
Delving in
responsible
Adderall for a while?
this? How is that possible? Anecdotally, though, I did talk to somebody who had commented on something I or somebody else had posted and said that they had worked for the DoD for years, handling like their classified systems, and said the entire thing is a mess and has to be redone. And he said they have no control of their systems. And that there's major incompetence.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. There's a right-wing writer. His first name's Malcolm. I think on Twitter his account's Tinkzorg. But he wrote an interesting article a couple weeks ago about how in the mid-'80s in the Soviet Union, there was like a commercial jet, just a little Cessna plane from Norway flew all the way over the Soviet Union, almost all the way to Moscow. And the military just didn't pick it up. It was totally incompetent. And, you know, the writer was making a case, you know, that was a huge symptom that the empire was about to collapse. And he was writing the article in the context of these Chinese spy balloons. But I think it could just as easily be applied to this sloppy leak of classified documents. I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe it is just as simple as gross incompetence in a dying empire that can't even do anything right.
Yeah, I mean, even on that end of it, though, it is. I feel like what happened is there was like some fucking. I think I think even on the light end, there was likely someone chilling in the group chat. You know what I mean? Like someone lurking in the shadow. You know, like so. Yeah. So, which is the irony here, because one of the main points we'll probably get is like, oh, we need more people monitoring Discords. It's like. That was probably because they were monitoring a Discord. So, and likely they very well may have been dropping the information, or at least, I don't know, essentially making it worse.
Yes.
I was mentioning.
Speaking of Discord, this could be a good time to mention the Buffalo shooter, Peyton Gendron. Ken, I know you put out an article about that. You were looking into the former federal agent that he was allegedly in contact with in Discord.
Yeah, that's right. And just to tie that into Jack Teixeira, he actually posted about the Buffalo shooting, oddly enough, or somebody under the OG account name was talking to his buddies about how the Buffalo shooting, the FBI had foreknowledge and let it happen to promote divide in the country. It could have been that Jack had just read the news, because about a year ago, the Buffalo News, based on inside sources, reported that a retired federal agent was in a Discord chat room where all these white supremacist and Nazi ideals were being discussed. Peyton Gendron was also there. He sent out an invite to people to live stream the shooting that he ended up doing, killing, I think, 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo. One of the people who got his invitation and who had been communicating with him was a retired federal agent. So this was reported about.
Why are they always retired?
Yeah, it's funny how that works. So this was reported about a year ago, and
nothing's happened.
Yeah, I think you guys probably know the Twitter account Boltzmann Booty. He's done a lot of good threads on Buffalo and other mass shootings, and I saw a thread by him a couple months ago that kind of rang some bells. Like, why don't I file a records request to get the interview summaries of what the FBI was asking this retired agent? The FBI just responded to me a couple days ago, essentially confirming that they did interview the retired Fed, but they denied me the records on the basis that the investigation is still ongoing. Even though Gendron pleaded guilty, he's going to prison for life. Apparently, they can't make these records public because there's some kind of investigation ongoing. And I should note that this is a common tactic that the FBI plays. The journalist Nick Bryant, he's the one who obtained Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book, and he leaked it to Gawker. I heard him say recently that he filed a FOIA request for records on Epstein and was told by the FBI that you can't have these records because the investigation is ongoing. Epstein died, 3 or 4 years ago, but there's still an open investigation. So this is something that definitely needs to be reformed. The FBI could just, the Kennedy investigation might still be ongoing. Maybe that's why.
We'll get a new one. We'll get a new one soon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, new Kennedy.
Yeah, well get a new Kennedy one
God,
soon. And this may be fucked up, but part of me is kind of like, I hope he does. Because it's like, I know it's awful to say, but it looks like he's lived a nice long life. And it's like, honestly, I feel like that's so far as like actually, mask off moment, I can't think of anything better. Like, think of a better mask off than that. Like, no matter how they go about it, like he could die of a heart attack tomorrow and they'll be like, feds did it.
Yep.
That's a good point. That would certainly accelerate the collapse.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even a collapse so much as it is. I just, and I guess this kind of ties back to the whole OKC, because everyone's like, why does this matter? Like, this is some shit from 95. Like, and I think when people say, why does it matter? They're meaning like in relation to things. Like in current day, why does this matter? Like, why does this thing that happened in 1995 matter when we have, World War III looming over here? We got January 6th. We got this, that. And it's like, I mean, granted, I'll give you World War III matters more. But like, aside from, something like that, I really feel like this, while it is older, I feel like this is something that's such a slam dunk if people get on it, and even like slam dunk just in convincing people if they can just look at the information. And like I said, it's like a Rosetta Stone. Like once you can see this allows you to be able to see other things. And like, I think a good example of this is the Ray Epps thing. I think like this is kind of the perfect divide where some people have this, like, it's almost like the they live glasses or whatever, where you see what's really going on. Because I do think there is like a real contingent of people who see a Ray Epps thing and they just go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What are you telling me this? Like, yeah, okay, that's weird. What are you even getting at? And they're like, what are you
telling me that Ray Epps made all 1,000 people storm the Capitol? That's what I get a lot. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Ray Epps did everything.
I just think people are like, don't believe in the idea. There are people just don't. I mean, like, they may have heard the concept of like provocateurs and stuff like that before. They just like, but they're just like, no. Why would the FBI want that to happen?
People just think that he's just like a boomer. Like, oh, he's just some crazy boomer. And this is like what they do. I don't know.
Well, what's frustrating though is there's a lot of people who will say, yeah, the CIA, they did the color revolution in Ukraine in 2014. But these same people on the left will then scoff at the notion that J6 was some kind of color revolution, when it seems to me to be, the same color, pardon the pun.
Yeah. They're always the smug people that say stuff like that, or they say things that like history is written by the victors when it's convenient for them. But when it's inconvenient for them, then no, we don't question the history books, and historical narratives. So it's just ridiculous. But I think Oklahoma City is important because, like you said, I think it is sort of like, it's something that everybody can look at now. I think given the time that has gone on and all of the information that is available now, that in the aftermath of that event was not available to investigators, documents and things like that, where you can just look at it and know, and you can prove that they lied every step of the way. You can show how they did it. And I think that when people can see that was horrific thing. Lives were lost. And for what, that's the Whitmer case is really bad, what they did to people, but like nobody died because of it. There are just people whose lives have been destroyed and they're in prison unjustly.
Yeah, I think part of what I'm getting here, it's almost like an art of the deal shit like thing. Like if I can get you to be like at least get your head scratching with something like OKC, it's a lot easier to sell you on a Ray Epps, on a fucking on a Michigan, or this or that. And it's like I feel like it's like one line that always stuck out to me, and like Jesse trying to do one of like a presentation he gave is like he's like, I don't have any like idea that like that anyone's gonna be prosecuted in this, and like he's alluding to the death of his brother and just Oklahoma City bombing in general. And he's like, but I can harm the reputation of the Department of Justice, and that sounds petty, I think, at its surface level. And I think he even does say, yeah, that's kind of me being petty and being an asshole. But in a real sense, that is the only thing you really, in a real sense, we can honestly really ever hope to get out of the justice system. Not just the apparatus that rules above us in general. Like that's the whole game, is awareness. And I'm not saying magically everyone's aware and everything's fixed, but at least if people are like, oh, that's fucked, then we can kind of be like, oh, you think that's fucked? I think that's fucked. We should hang out. And like, and just kind of like apply that concept out in like a network. And it's like, I think, and I also think being aware of psyops prevents the effects of psyops, because the whole idea is they're trying to get the public to buy in. And as long as you have a few resolute people that know what they're talking about, you kind of can quell the tide of some psyops. I mean, obviously not every single one, but I mean, it seems like a lot of the psyops in the past like decade just really haven't been hitting the way they used to back in the day. I don't know if you guys agree,
yes,
but I
they
think
don't
that's
have
kind of
that,
the point.
like the ability to pull it off for whatever reason, probably because of the internet and social media and all of that. I think that it was easier for them to control things. And that's why maybe they did things like potentially murder people like Terrence Yeaky. Maybe they wouldn't do that in this day and age. They might not have a reason to, because maybe he would have had the ability to say what he needed to say immediately, publicly, and then there's no reason to kill him at that point.
Yeah.
But as far as like Oklahoma City, so many things came from that. The way that people conceptualize, like the narrative that we have about like the lone gunman, like we have from JFK days, like this radicalized lone wolf, domestic terrorist, the soldier turned like to use the skills he learned and was trained by our country, like to fight our country now. Like that's where he
created a lazy Fed archetype. But go on.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And that still lives with us today. And there's still people who don't know the truth of the story. But I think that for whatever reason right now, we're at a point culturally, and maybe it's like the 100th monkey thing, once so many people are like, okay, this was an operation, we were lied to. There was a crazy cover up here, and just everything they did was so egregious. For whatever reason, I think everybody can, agree on that now.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point too, and like that they wouldn't do this now. And I guess I kind of was pushing at it a little bit as well, and I didn't realize it. I really think that's kind of the crux of what makes OKC important, is because I think just they were at a point in time where I don't think they should have done it. Obviously, I don't think morally they should have done it, but like they were overstepping their abilities in a sense. I think we were at a weird time technologically in the mid 90s where we did have this burgeoning technology, but it wasn't quite in the state it is now. But it was the original building blocks of what we have now. So a lot of that information is still out there in the ether. We're just getting more sophisticated methods of accumulating it and processing it and putting it together in, cohesive ways. So like, it's like we caught them with their dick in the cookie jar. Like that's what happened. Like, and they're at a point where they're kind of like, oh fuck. Like, and I think now, because you have people like Richard Booth, like Ken, I was like, accumulating documents, still writing about shit from decades old. And it's just like, and then you have people like Wendy that's still doing like on the ground research, trying to do like all this stuff accumulates. And, it ties into other things, like you were mentioning with it. Like I really think, like, I mean, like shit, PatCon. Like you look at PatCon, like really, like it just is as simple as it comes down to like recognizing patterns, because you're just like, oh shit, they're like damn near the same thing, and you can deduce things from there.
And if you don't know your history, though, you can't stop it from repeating. You know, if people don't know the truth of what happened in the past, they're not going to know the truth of what's happening right now. Yeah. And if they've been allowed to get away with things like this, you know, that's not good. No.
Yeah. Ken, you got something to say? You look like you perked up a couple times.
You just hit on a key point. I think the timing of the Oklahoma City bombing is another reason why it's so important. You know, right before the internet exploded, their op was still pretty sloppy, and they didn't realize that their mistakes would be saved for the rest of time, for all eternity. I think Fed ops these days are actually done more carefully. They're able to flood the zone with disinformation, so it's hard to tell what's a valid conspiracy versus what's disinformation. But you look at Oklahoma City, first of all, it's an American story. There are a few international connections, but pretty much all the records, everything's in English. So people like us can, you know, just read the records. This isn't 9/11 where you have to read Arabic or look in Germany and all these different countries where the attack was planned. It's all right there. It's all like a storybook for people to see for themselves how corrupt things are. And I don't think we've gotten anything that spelled out ever since then. And before Oklahoma City, you didn't have mass media to spread important stories. So like with the JFK story, I think certain things got buried forever because you didn't have the internet or way to store information. It's that sweet spot.
I do think one of the issues that we have now is how quickly information can disappear. Everything's digitized now, and I don't trust that, you know? No way.
You said you had new information on the Michigan stuff, right, Christina?
Yes, I have some updates. I don't remember where things were the last time I was on, so I'll just provide like a general update. I think everybody knows now that Adam and Barry have been moved to supermax. As I've gotten letters from them recently, I got 2 from Adam. One dated the 14th, one dated the 19th, so not that long ago. And he said that he's still no contact with his lawyer. Same for Barry. And their lawyers are trying to contact them. I've seen letters from Mr. Sweeney, Barry's lawyer, that he sent to Barry's fiance, dated in March, where he said he was trying to get into contact with Barry. We're now almost into May. That's crazy. And just little things that they do. Adam, it talks about it in his letter, and I put it up on Twitter so people can go read it. You can see it there. He talks about the conditions in the supermax. So I know it sounds kind of silly to go into this stuff like, well, what do you expect prison to be like? Obviously, it's not going to be nice, but they do certain things where they're supposed to be allowed rec time. So they're supposed to get 1 hour where they can kind of stretch their legs and whatever. But in order to qualify for it, they have to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and have their beds made, but they're not given a clock inside their cell. So they have to kind of figure out how to make sure that they're up at 5 o'clock in the morning and have everything ready. And then when they go through and jump through all of these hoops to be able to do that, the guards come by and just laugh at them and say, you're not getting rec time. And just cruel things like that. They're not allowed to access commissary. So he said that they've been barely feeding them, and that the food that they've been getting is not very edible. When he was in Nuevo, he used to be able to purchase, extra food. He's not able to do that anymore. For whatever reason, he can't access that. So it's very sad. It's hard, I think, being in there. And I had recorded a video statement that Adam made for the weaponization committee that is completely gone from my computer, from all of my devices. It's just disappeared. And I had, in that same video, I had interviewed his cellmate at Nuevo, 2 of them, and they'd provided like kind of, I guess you could call statements or character witness statements, whatever, just like their experience with Adam in there, that were very touching stories that were very nice, and it's just gone. So I had to have Adam do a new, like, write a whole new statement for the weaponization committee. So we know that that's never going to go anywhere. So I have that, and I put that up on my Substack. People can go and read it. It's very sad. It's just very sad. And my concern is that I want to share the information. I want people to know what's happening to Adam and Barry and Supermax, how they're being treated. But every time I publish something, I'm also concerned that it's making them a target, for more and worse retaliation. And then I can't do anything to help them. So it's a hard situation. And I think really the only thing that can be done to help them is to just keep talking about their case and to keep it in the public. So if anything happens to them, there's not an incentive for anything to happen to them.
Yeah, man. Are there any deadlines on the illegal stuff they're trying to pursue right now? Because that seems insane. Not being able to talk to your lawyer. I mean, I don't know the particulars.
It's nuts. There's the appeals process itself can take years, but it has been 7 months since the end of the retrial for him to not have been able to speak with his appeals lawyer since being moved to Supermax while the appeal is ongoing, I think is ridiculous and not right.
Yeah, no, that's insane. Yeah, I mean, he was able to talk to you, but not his lawyer. I'm assuming you mean like over the phone. So he's able to probably send letters or the letter's not getting through.
So prior to them being moved, I was able to meet with them. I was able to do these video visits with them, both Adam and Barry. They were able to call me pretty much whenever they wanted, as long as they had the money in their commissary to call. But when they got moved, now I can't really talk to them except through letters. So that's how it is for everybody. But their lawyers, it's not supposed to be that way. For their lawyers, they should be able to speak with them, whether that's by phone or an in-person visit. It doesn't matter. They should be able to speak with one another.
Yeah. Shit. Yeah. No, I don't really have much to say on that. It's just, that's fucked up. Yeah. That's I mean, go ahead.
And just to hit on the theme of this episode, I think I've talked about it on this show before, but this is the exact same thing that happened to Terry Nichols when he was trying to get information out about John Doe 2. He was put under increasingly restrictive administration measures so they could monitor his communications, make sure he's not talking to reporters. The only reason he was able to give some information to Jesse Trenadu is I think Trenadu was actually appointed his attorney for a brief time. So that's the only reason we were able to get anything out of Terry Nichols. But yeah, the exact same thing they did to Nichols, they're doing to Adam Fox and Barry Croft right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that's how they control the information. I mean, that it does seem like, from my recollections of the story of Nichols, it seems like there were probably a handful of like almost times where he almost really divulged very serious information. Don't get me wrong, he has actually divulged a lot of very serious, meaningful information, but like the shit, like who John Doe 2 is or shit like that, like he has almost done it. It seems like, but it seems like anytime we get to that almost, it's like, oh, they pull the reins back in or something like that.
Ironically, he was almost supposed to go on 60 Minutes before they locked him down and wouldn't let him speak. 20 some years later, 60 Minutes has gone from an actual journalism program to now they're doing propaganda pieces on Ray Epps. So that's another sign of how far this country's institutions have decayed.
Yeah, at least before they like kept it a little bit hidden, like they would just not make the story happen one way or the other, or there were at least seemed to be people trying to do what needed to be done. I actually meant to ask you about the Ray Epps thing. I read your article about you. I guess you didn't actually talk to the daughter. I actually sent her I saw her. I found her on Twitter, and I sent her a message like, kind of along the lines of like to hear more. Like if it sounds, assuming you are you say are, I'd love to have you on the show, kind of deal. What kind of feelings are you getting from that? There was someone who popped up claiming to be his adopted daughter with alleges abuse, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's awful, but it's kind of beside the point of what we're getting at, the abuse. But I mean, I guess you could say maybe that speaks to him being a piece of shit. But in your article, you were mentioning weird stuff about going to Mexico, like stuff that made it sound like, yeah, you might have been a glowy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm still agnostic about whether this lady's legitimate, but I did a little bit of a deep dive into her. And, if you go on these like people finder sites or these data broker websites to find people's email addresses, numbers, who they're related to, she does pop up as a relative to Ray Epps. So there's at least that indication. She's posted childhood photos of people who look like her and Epps. She's described in great detail her experiences, information about Epps and the wife that appears to be legitimate. And yeah, she makes some disturbing allegations of child abuse against Epps. But the things you referenced, they're more interesting to me as she talks about they'd make these mysterious trips to Mexico and they'd always get pulled over by Border Patrol, not on their way to Mexico, but on their way back. The family would get placed in some kind of holding cell while Ray Epps is apparently probably calling Langley or something to straighten things out. And then they'd be on their merry way. And Ray Epps would tell his family, like, oh, they wanted to make sure we didn't have exotic fruit in the car or anything like that. And so that's the story. And anybody with a brain can view that with high suspicion. That was Ray Epps smuggling drugs for the government or anything. He did make a call saying, hey, this is Sergeant Ray Epps. The daughter heard him making this call, allegedly, like, you got to get me out of here. I'm going to shoot my way out. So again, the theme of the episode, how does this relate to OKC? There are always common themes. And there's a PatCon story where some of McVeigh's friends had a buddy stuck in jail down in Mexico. And who sprung the person from jail was Dave Holloway, the current NASA contractor who was friends with Strassmeyer and a bunch of other glowies. So there seems to be a common theme here where glowies can get people out of prison or help cross the border with illegal things. It's again, common threads.
Yeah, I mean, they really are always just lurking in the shadow. Like we were talking before, this whole thing, in my head, when you zoom out on like OKC or just really any of these stories, they're all just fucking psyops. Like, that's like the best way to put, like, it's like OKC, I think is great. Cause especially once you start going to like some of Wendy's like stuff where she goes deeper on kind of like tangents that aren't really, they're only like kind of like tertiarily connected to like the Oklahoma City bombing and shit. Like when she starts getting like Jack Oliphant and shit, and you're like, oh, okay. Like you could kind of see the mechanisms of how they're controlling difference, because like Oliphant, like I'm sure you remember, Ken, like what was I can't really do perfectly, but I know he was kind of a guy who definitely made claims about being a Fed in the past. He was running weird cults, also was tied into these like white supremacists. So for when I see this, I say, oh, looks like they were trying to tap into the religious side and kind of tie that into like some of the white supremacist movements. That way they can kind of create this perception of this. There are negative aspects of this burgeoning patriot movement, and that way they can infiltrate them from different angles. So like it is like, and then when you start understanding the shit they were doing, Oliphant with what was it, his Sunshine Kids or whatever the fuck they were called.
Oh my God, Sunshine Kids.
I don't know. I don't think that's right, but it's some dumb shit like that. No, Hallelujah People. Wasn't that what it was? The Hallelujah People?
Something like that.
That's not better.
Yeah, he started weird cults and shit. I mean, maybe he wasn't a Fed. Maybe he was just a crazy person, but he was definitely a lot of ties to Fed people. And then like, I think I want to say it was within the week of or not too long around the time of Oklahoma City bombing, I believe McVeigh and I think some other people were up there at I don't know if he had a ranch or what, but up with Oliphant. I might be wrong on that one, but there were definitely connections. It's just weird. Once you start zooming out and looking at all this shit, you're like, oh, it really is just a bunch of psyops connected to other psyops on top of a psyop. It's just weird because it's just like mind games. It's like,
and they're like, I see them sort of as like theater productions, you know, staged productions, and they're done like to traumatize, you know. Think about like, and it sounds kind of woo-woo to say it, but I believe that they believe in the occult, and I think that they believe in, you know, doing rituals and stuff. And I think that they try to incorporate that in weird ways, like through numerology or whatever of the different things that they do. Their little gay ops, glow ops, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And I think that they are designed to like traumatize society.
Yeah, I like you say woo woo. It's funny. I hear a lot of concepts that people will attribute to woo woo, and then I'll be able to understand them in or think of them in a more. And I'm sure you probably meant it that way, but like I see that, think like MK Ultra, sort of like
exactly.
Like you don't have to. I mean, I guess giving a religious impetus behind it, I think actually plays into the MK Ultra aspect. So with somebody with Oliphant and the weird cult stuff going on there. Like, and then I believe, was it shit? I want to say, I might be wrong. I keep saying I might be wrong because I'm not as well versed on this stuff. But I want to say Chevy Kehoe was one of his cult kids.
Yeah.
So like, Kehoe is someone who had prior knowledge. He was at meetings for the bombings. The biggest thing for him too is he murdered a gun dealer or Mueller. I forget the dude's first name. And his family. He had a daughter that was under 10. He murdered them. It was believed because they had knowledge of, of stuff, of happenings in Elohim City. And so like, but this was a guy that looks like was kind of mind fucked by it, or could it be? I mean, just the simple fact he was in these weird cults where there was a lot of weird shit going on there. I mean, I really keep saying weird stuff, but it really is.
It is, though. I mean, just to bring it to modern, times, modern cases of why that's relevant, what you're describing, weird cult things that were happening in Elohim City. I know I've talked about it before, but
to be clear, I think he was in Arizona, but it was tied in. But go on.
Okay. I've talked about it before. The American chapter of the Order of Nine Angles, the O9A, was led by a man who was long suspected of being some kind of informant or intelligence operative who was engaging in these very bizarre, like brainwashing type techniques, giving young kids alcohol and drugs and then doing weird things, and he was publishing books, these satanic neo-Nazi propaganda books that were encouraging people to infiltrate law enforcement, the military, as part of joining their group. They want you to go undercover and like do that for whatever reason, but it encourages pedophilia. It encourages cullings. So the FBI was paying for this. This guy had been an informant since 2003. And the FBI had funded his publishing house that was producing the satanic neo-Nazi propaganda. They gave it over $200,000. Okay. So the FBI was effectively running a neo-Nazi publishing house. And then, same thing, trying to create like domestic terrorists, all of these so-called like white supremacy, the big white supremacy threat, all these groups, that's just them creating them or infiltrating pre-existing groups that weren't really groups, like Adam Waffen, that were a bunch of kids trying to be edgy online by posting fascist imagery. And then they meet this FBI informant, and then they start getting these crazy ideas and becoming radicalized. And the use of brainwashing techniques on them, giving them mushrooms and alcohol and stuff when they're underage. And this guy's working for the FBI. They're not supposed to be doing stuff like that, but they do. Yeah. And they get away with it.
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to, Wendy Painting has a bunch of friends who are researchers, kind of I think they're Marxists and far left researchers. I haven't looked into all their work, but they make the case that this goes back decades. There's a lot of fringe religious groups and cults that are basically intelligence operations. 100 years ago, this was a mechanism for how the U.S. would spy on China or certain communist countries. You can't send anybody there, but you could send church missionaries there and maybe sneak in a couple feds or CIA people. And so, the camel got its nose under the tent back then, and the operations have just become more sophisticated over time. In fact, I think some of Wendy's friends contend that Waco, Mount Carmel, was some kind of intelligence psyop operation. And the reason they burnt it down was to kind of cover up the evidence of what the glowies were doing there. I don't know if I buy that theory. I think the leftists kind of ascribe too much control and intentionality on the part of government. I'm more of the view that random things happen and people kind of react. But I'm open to the idea.
Yeah, I hear that about Waco, and I just feel like you mentioned they were lefties, and I guess I could kind of understand how a lefty would see that. I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up in the country. I grew up religious. I don't know. I guess me looking into Waco, like, don't get me wrong, they seemed a little weird. There was weird shit going on there, but it didn't seem so off to where I'd be like, yup, completely and off. Like, I don't know, maybe they have stuff to go off of, but if you're someone who wasn't grown up in the country, didn't grow up in religious areas, like I guess or around guns and stuff like that, they would seem very odd and foreign. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the stuff that was going on there is definitely not something I was familiar with growing up, because I know there were allusions to him marrying 15, 16-year-olds.
14.
But point being is, it seems to be some of the other 14, some of the other aspects of kind of the culture there, and I don't know. And I remember I've gone on semi deep dives on his religious beliefs, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't believe it. I mean, I'm not religious at all, but I grew up in the church, and so I kind of have a decent understanding. So I was like, I don't know. I guess it kind of somewhat makes sense if you understand this passage that way or that one this way. A little kooky, but whatever. You can kind of get nuts when you try to understand Revelations. So.
Well, he did predict tanks rolling down his driveway, and a lot of the Branch Davidians still consider him to be a prophet. And he got more things right than a lot of other.
And it wasn't even, I guess, like he was necessarily doing death by suicide, because I hear that and I go, well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I bet you I can get shot by cops.
Fair enough.
But I guess tanks in your yard's a little bit specific. Shit. Yeah, no. God, I just totally brain farted. Good point. Oh, man. Ken, lately you've been on a tear on the Vegas shooting stuff. So I kind of want to probably peter out on the Vegas shooting stuff, because I mean, that's one people always want to talk about, but it's like, and people are always asking me to do a series on it, and it's like, the information is so clusterfucked. It's like, I've never run across someone that I would even semi call an expert or whatever, or something close to it, to kind of bring me along in the series. I
would say I would recommend Mindy Robinson. She did a pretty good documentary on it.
Okay.
As somebody that might be someone to bring on, I'd actually be interested to hear what she thinks about the documents that just came out.
I feel like if I remember Mindy, she's huge. I doubt I'll get her on the show, but I'll keep it in mind.
Hey,
she's nice.
It's worth a try. What do you say, Ken?
All right. What are you saying? We're not huge.
Come on.
No, you're big dogs. Isn't she fucking? What is she on? Is she on Blaze or some shit? She's on some big stuff.
She might be.
I think she's some sort of. She's on that line between corpo and I don't know, legit. Yeah. All right, Ken, what the fuck is going on? Who was it? Black helicopters? Was it some weird drug deal gone wrong or whatever? Political espionage or whatever the fuck? I know those are the two ones everyone goes to. The helicopters did it, and then there's some weird fucking claims there was some state, thing that went bad, that they used the shooting as a cover up or some shit. Obviously, I'm being silly. I'm not asking you, sir. But what have you been covering?
Yeah, Mindy might be better to speak to that. I wouldn't consider myself an expert by any means on the Las Vegas shooting. I've just broken a couple bombshell stories, and again, it's just a sad commentary on the state of American journalism. That okay, so the FBI dropped a new trove of documents, about 1,000 memos, various records about what agents were doing in the days and weeks after the shooting, the deadliest mass shooting in American history. So when these documents dropped, the Associated Press picked up on a couple of memos that talked about Paddock losing money gambling and being mad at the casino for not giving him all his comps and perks. He's a high roller. And AP kind of presented this as a possible motive for the attack. And there was one other story where I think Newsweek found a record. Again, the theme of the episode, Stephen Paddock was allegedly a fan of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, which that's just idiotic. I mean, anybody that's watched this show for 5 minutes knows that even if you're a Nazi white supremacist, nobody treats McVeigh and Nichols as heroes.
I mean, maybe I could understand McVeigh to some, because I actually have seen people who kind of stand for him and kind of like, I'll see people like, well, at least you fucking did something. You're like, okay, well, you're an idiot and you haven't really thought about this deeply. But Nichols, like, I don't even understand. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not even trying to be mean to the guy, but it's like if you understand his role in the whole narrative, it's kind of like, it kind of seems like he's a bit of a bitch.
Definitely a pushover. Definitely a pushover. So let's see. Okay, so yeah, I saw these stories on the FBI records, and I said, well, I got to see these FBI records for myself. And mind you, they had been sitting publicly for anybody to inspect them for over a week at that point. And I started scrolling through these records and just seeing stuff that was blowing my mind. Interviews with people who knew Paddock, who would talk, said Paddock would complain about having like a brain chip in him, or he would wake up screaming at night. There was rumors that he had been a patient at a psych hospital. They said we found several people named Stephen Paddock in this hospital's database, but they downplayed it because that person had a different social security number, even though Timothy McVeigh had multiple social security numbers. So yeah, I did a couple stories just on the severe mental illness that's described in these records about Paddock. And this it seems to me as he had a lot of problems. And one of the reasons I think this is very important is because a lot of people, including the Department of Homeland Security, is trying to classify this attack as anti-government terrorism, even though it's not even clear that this was terrorism at all. There wasn't really a political motive, and it wouldn't make sense for a supposed right-wing terrorists to shoot at a bunch of, country music attendees who are probably conservative. They're probably all armed. Like, it was allegedly he wanted to wake up people so they arm themselves. Well, these guys are already armed. So the notion that this is a terrorist attack, let alone an anti-government attack, is totally fallacious. But the last story on this I've done, I think a week ago, was the DHS actually funded University of Maryland, some terrorism think tank housed in the college, to do a study on how this is anti-government terrorism. And now the DHS is probably using that as a feedback loop to divert more resources to counterterrorism methods on the basis of classifying the deadliest shooting as anti-government terrorism. It's kind of a similar dynamic as the Twitter files, where some government-funded think tank will raise the alarm about Russian bots on Twitter, and then that'll lead to the DHS cracking down on government bots. It seems to me as like a similar feedback loop.
It's nuts. Man, I read, I think, a couple of stories when they came out. I remember the crazy stuff, like, about his mental health and stuff. And it's funny. We keep bringing back to OKC, and this is, why this shit all ties. Like, that is actually an aspect of the story too with Timothy McVeigh, is I mean, this is another part when it comes to it gets like some of the stuff when you get zooming far out and some of the stuff more on the outskirts of what is actually essential OKC story, I get a little bit more fuzzy with. So like I think they call it the experimental soldier is the way it's usually, or the archetype that of that, narrative that is the way I think Wendy usually puts it. And some people will put it as the experimental soldier aspect of McVeigh, but that was a thing. I mean, for one, there was the, where most people will jump off of and getting to the experimental soldier. I guess is less experimental, just straight up soldier, but he did supposedly, according to him, only to him, we don't really have anything else to back it up aside from his words, is he supposedly did some covert black ops shit as opposed to dropping out of the special forces training he was in. But then on top of that, then you end up with this weird stuff like you look at his medical record and you look at something ridiculous like 50 to 70 dental visits or some shit. There is stuff where he complains that he believes they put like implants in him, and like there is weird stuff when you look into it, like about his like mental health, where he'll make claims one time and then make something that's complete opposite claim another time. And this isn't like stuff that's like, oh, he might just be changing the narrative to fuck with you. It's like just weird shit where you're like, does he just not know? Mm-hmm. Like you kind of makes you wonder the state of his brain. Because I know a lot of people might think I'm alluding to how he actually did give multiple narratives of his backstory essentially to different people throughout. But I'm alluding to stuff where they'll be like, just weird shit about his medical records in like a matter of fact way, and be like, no, I never did that. And you're like, dude, I'm looking at the record right here. like shit, like I can't remember. I wish I need to dig into that more. I guess for me, I'm more like that that is when you start, if you get someone to buy onto that shit, they're already with you anyways. So,
I think Wendy Painting says it probably more funny than I do, but I guess McVeigh, his first meeting with initial set of lawyers, the first thing he says is, "I'm not a brainwash victim." It's like, yeah, that's something a brainwash victim definitely wouldn't say.
Just had to get that out of the way.
Yeah, just like right off the top, the lawyers are like, well, we never said you were.
Yeah, because that was a big thing with him. He was really obsessed with saying, like, I think it was even his like it was in a poem that he left. I forget the poem, like his last words on this earth essentially were like a poem, and it was like, I'm the master of my destiny. I forget the exact quote. And like, but weirdly when you read it and you understand his backstory, it almost comes off as like cope, or like he's trying to convince himself. Like, no, like it's almost like it makes you think like it's someone who did have their mind fucked with, and is just like, no, like it's trying to like almost reassert like, dominion over their own brain, essentially being like this. Yeah. No, like that's the way it comes off to me. Cause it doesn't like, it's a weird thing for anyone to say really, given the context, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it. This is pattern recognition, but it's like, I don't know. When you get into like the backstory of Tim, you're like, okay, weird shit's going on.
I'm there with you. And there's, Paddock, apparently he did hang out in the gun show circuit. He has ties, but he's a former IRS. Like he's got ties to Lockheed Martin and all these weird.
Was he Evergreen he was tied to somehow, I believe?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Or no, it was one of those other cutouts, but maybe it was Evergreen. I don't know. But like, I know there is like, if you follow the trail, like planes and weird shit he's bought recently, you get to a few Fed cutouts. Like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, he worked for a company that was bought by Lockheed. I don't remember the name of that company.
Yeah. Oh, well, shit. Yeah, no, we kind of got into the crazy stuff here at the end. It's weird. It all kind of like intersected with each other too. And it's like, I want to bring up, and I've brought this on my show before, because it weirdly ties into, but I think it sets the timeline back a little bit to what we were talking about. If you look into the Manson stuff, like if everyone read Chaos by Tom O'Neill, you see like he leaves a pretty good document trail that it seems to be there was something similar going on there, where he clearly had some sort of cult thing going on. There were Fed entities in the background, or maybe not Fed but shadowy entities in the background that seem to always get them out of trouble. There's a lot of weird shit there, and it is like this is what I'm kind of getting at with, once you can kind of identify these patterns and kind of overlay them with the other things going on at different times, you can kind of see, because this ties into the experimental soldier, the cult stuff we were talking about, Paddock, this type. Like once you start recognizing these patterns, you can kind of just go nuts with it, because it's like, I don't know, like how am I trying to express this? Like, that is the earlier versions of the stuff we were describing, essentially, you know, with the cult stuff. It's just like mind fuckery. And it's kind of like they've just found, it's almost like they went down different skill trees in a video game, you know, like that's how it reads to me. You're like, oh, well, yeah, okay, this one took on more of a religious vibe, and, you know, but they probably incorporated this with that. And it becomes too easy, you know, when you get it. If anything, the trick is to not get too sure of yourself and be like, yep, this is this. Like that's the biggest trick once you start figuring out the patterns going on and how these different individuals work. But with that, let's go ahead and get out of here. We're almost an hour and a half. We've covered a lot of shit. We've been going through. Let's let's do plugs again. Christina, if you want to go and give your plugs, people know who you are, where they can find you,
Yes.
whatever new stuff you're working on, etc.
I'm still working on the Whitmer documentary, which apparently is just going to take up all of my time until it's done. And you can see my channel is Radix Verum. You can also subscribe to the official YouTube channel for the documentary, which is just K&K Film on YouTube.
Awesome. Ken?
Headline USA, libertarianinstitute.org.
Awesome. Looking forward to more work from you. And I promise, audience out there, I'll try to get back to some other stuff besides OKC stuff, but it's like a twofold thing. It's kind of like this thing where, like, one, a lot of people have been wanting me to talk about it. I've been going to different shows, so I've been talking about it a lot. And then, so two, I'm also just obsessed with it right now. So I'm sorry, I just cover shit I want to talk about. I don't know what to tell you, but I'll try to get back to some of my theory shit and stuff here soon. Oh, I forgot. I had one question I wanted to ask you, Ken, from a patron. That they put on, they requested to be asked on my Patreon. I mean, maybe you have something for this. I don't know. Do they think it would be possible to find missing felons and soldiers that disappeared around the time of the Oklahoma City bombing? They could give us the answer to the extra leg belongs to from the from the bombing site.
The answer to that is no. The leg was lost. It was one other piece of evidence that the FBI destroyed. This was revealed by the FBI whistleblower, Dr. Frederick Whitehurst. He was like a PhD who worked in the crime lab, exposed a bunch of corruption in relation to, I think, the OJ trial, TWA, and also Oklahoma, Waco. And the missing leg was one of the things that unfortunately is lost to eternity.
I mean, this may sound awful, but it's kind of like, what does that, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't want to say what does that matter, because it is a human being, but I guess like the fucked up part of me is kind of like, all right, well, we're at 168 and 1/4. I don't think we can really report this number, so leg's gone. Like,
it could be John Doe too. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like, I don't know if there's things to point to that there's a reason for it, because I guess I could just see government workers being like, this sounds like a lot of work to figure out the other 3/4 of whatever the hell this is. So we could just round down here. But all right, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get out of here. I appreciate you guys' time. If you guys want to check out my work, I mean, you're already at my show, but I'm also I'm on YouTube, all the major art podcasts, Aussie as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Tower Gang Jose. I think that's all I got. With that, I appreciate it. Oh, I thought she was staring at the screen. I thought she was really serious looking at something, but I guess she just her signal left. But with that, appreciate both of you. I got a great episode with great guests. Thanks so much all for putting together from Bonghorn Langhorn. And with that, we are out of here. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thanks again.